Arben Dervishi, a name that strikes fear across Albania and beyond. The ruthless drug lord who escaped prison not once, not twice, but 4 times, leaving authorities baffled and his empire stronger than ever. This is the story of a man who defied the law, outsmarted the system, and became a legend of criminal audacity. Arben Dervishi was born in the narrow, crowded streets of Tirana, where life was a daily struggle and opportunities were scarce. From a young age, he learned that survival required cunning and boldness. His family lived in a small, crumbling apartment, barely making ends meet, and Arben quickly realized that the world rewarded those who could seize it, not those who waited for it. While other children played in the streets, he watched the movements of older men, gangsters, smugglers, and traders, and absorbed their strategies like a student of war. By his teenage years, Arben had already earned a reputation as a fearless problem solver. He started with petty crimes, small thefts, and running errands for local criminals. Each task was an education, teaching him how to manipulate situations, read people, and anticipate danger. He was careful not to draw too much attention, but bold enough to take risks that others would shy away from. Slowly, he began building a network of contacts, young men who respected his intelligence and instinct. In his early 20s, Arben made a decisive move into the world of organized crime. Unlike many who rose and fell quickly, he combined street-level ruthlessness with a rare strategic mind. He studied law enforcement tactics, learned about drug routes through Europe, and even memorized the patterns of police patrols. His operations were precise, almost surgical, targeting weaknesses in rival gangs while avoiding unnecessary exposure. Within a few years, Arben had grown from a local thug into the head of a sprawling drug network, one that stretched far beyond Albania's borders. What set Arben apart was not just his ambition, but his ability to inspire loyalty. Those who worked under him were fiercely devoted, not out of fear alone, but because they believed in his vision. He rewarded cleverness, protected his allies, and punished betrayal with swift decisiveness. Word of his reputation spread quickly, attracting both admirers and enemies. Rival gangs learned to respect the man who seemed untouchable, and law enforcement agencies began to treat his name with caution. Despite his wealth and influence, Arben remained elusive. He rarely appeared in public, using intermediaries to conduct business and staying one step ahead of anyone who tried to track him. Rumors swirled about his methods, with some claiming he had insiders in government offices and police stations, feeding him information and helping him avoid capture. His operations were so sophisticated that even seasoned investigators struggled to trace them, and every attempt to corner him ended in frustration. By the time he reached his late 20s, Arben Dervishi had become more than a criminal. He had become a symbol of power and cunning in Albania. His story was no longer just about crime. It was about a man who had emerged from the shadows of poverty and built a empire that defied authority. To the world outside, he was a ghost, untouchable and mysterious, a figure whose ambition and intelligence would soon make history in ways that no one could have predicted. After years of operating in the shadows, Arben Dervishi's luck finally ran thin. The Albanian authorities, under intense pressure from European partners, launched one of the most comprehensive investigations in the country's history. Surveillance teams monitored his known associates, tapped phones, and tracked financial transactions that hinted at the immense scale of his empire. Every lead was meticulously followed, and slowly the authorities closed in on the man who had seemed untouchable. It was a hunt that took months, requiring patience, strategy, and a determination that matched Arben's own cunning. Arben's capture came as a dramatic climax to the pursuit. He was cornered in a safe house on the outskirts of Tirana, far from the bustling streets he once controlled. Security forces swarmed the area with precision, surrounding the building in the early hours of the morning. Despite the sudden raid, Arben managed to remain calm. He had anticipated the possibility of capture, and though he could not escape this time, he refused to panic. His composure in that moment only added to his legend. Even in defeat, he seemed in control. Once inside prison, he was treated as one of the most dangerous criminals in Albania. The authorities placed him under maximum security, believing that every precaution would prevent any chance of escape. Prison guards patrolled every corridor, cameras monitored every movement, and a strict schedule controlled his daily life. Yet even in confinement, Arben's presence loomed over the facility. Fellow inmates whispered stories about him. Rival gang members feared his influence, and prison staff became uneasy under his quiet, calculating gaze. He observed everything, noting routines, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities that others overlooked. It was only a matter of time before Arben's intelligence and patience revealed a flaw. Using contacts outside the prison, he began to orchestrate a plan that would shock the nation. A network of loyalists quietly moved in his support, creating opportunities that the authorities could not foresee. Supplies, tools, and information flowed through channels that seemed invisible to investigators, all designed to facilitate one audacious goal: escape. The first attempt was not hurried or reckless. It was methodical, a reflection of Arben's careful nature and strategic mind. Then, on a cold, quiet night, the unthinkable happened. A tunnel, hidden beneath the prison walls, allowed Arben to slip away without anyone noticing until it was too late. Authorities arrived to find only an empty cell, his absence marked by the lingering sense of disbelief. News of his escape spread like wildfire, igniting shock and outrage across the country. How could a man, under such strict supervision, vanish so completely? Questions swirled about inside help, corruption, and the extent of his influence. The first escape became a defining moment in Arben Dervishi's story. It was no longer just about crime. It was about a man who could outsmart the system itself. From that moment on, he became a legend in the criminal underworld, a symbol of cunning, ambition, and the terrifying possibility that no prison, no matter how secure, could hold him forever. Authorities vowed to capture him again, but the world had already begun to view Arben as more than a criminal. He was a ghost, a master strategist whose story was only beginning to unfold. Arben Dervishi's second escape stunned not only the authorities but the entire nation. After his first disappearance, security measures had been tightened to unprecedented levels. Every corridor of the prison was under constant surveillance. Guards doubled their patrols, and even the routines of prisoners were monitored to the smallest detail. High-tech cameras, motion sensors, and restricted movement schedules were supposed to make escape impossible. Yet, Arben's mind was always several steps ahead, constantly analyzing, calculating, and observing. During his second imprisonment, Arben remained outwardly calm and obedient. He did not draw attention to himself, but quietly watched everything. He studied the guards' habits, the moments they relaxed, the blind spots in the cameras, the weak links in communication. He noted which officers were complacent and which were easily influenced. Every minor incident, every seemingly insignificant detail became a piece of the puzzle he would later use to orchestrate his escape. Even in confinement, Arben's presence was unsettling. He radiated control and patience, waiting for the exact right moment to strike. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A routine power outage occurred one evening, plunging the prison into darkness. For most, it was a minor inconvenience, but for Arben, it was the perfect storm. During the blackout, surveillance cameras temporarily failed, alarms were delayed, and communication between guards became chaotic. He moved with precision, navigating corridors and security checkpoints with the familiarity of someone who had memorized every inch of the facility. His knowledge of the prison's layout, combined with the timing of the outage, created a rare and fleeting window for escape. Arben's second escape was executed with remarkable efficiency. Guards initially assumed he had been moved to another section, or had been transferred. It took hours before they realized the truth: he was gone, vanished once again, without leaving a trace. Investigators combed the facility, interviewed staff, and searched the surrounding area, but nothing could indicate where he had gone. The sheer audacity of his actions left the authorities questioning the integrity of their own security measures. Had there been an inside accomplice? Had the blackout been purely coincidental? Or had it been orchestrated? Every answer led to more questions, deepening the mystery surrounding Arben's abilities and reach. Outside the prison, his empire continued to operate as if nothing had changed. His network remained active, drug shipments proceeded uninterrupted, and rival gangs watched nervously as his influence seemed to grow stronger, not weaker. The second escape solidified Arben's reputation as a criminal who could not be contained, a man whose intelligence and cunning made him nearly untouchable. Even those who opposed him could not ignore the sheer brilliance of his maneuvers. The second escape also changed the public perception of Arben Dervishi. He was no longer just a criminal or a fugitive. He had become a legend. Stories of his cunning spread through the streets, whispered among locals and law enforcement alike. Every detail of his escapes added to the mythos of a man who seemed capable of outsmarting anyone, anywhere, at any time. The nation began to realize that capturing him would require more than just security. It would demand a strategy as clever and daring as Arben himself, a challenge that few were prepared to face. While authorities scrambled to recapture Arben Dervishi, his criminal empire continued to thrive with ruthless efficiency. His absence from the streets did not weaken his influence. If anything, it made his network more formidable. Trusted lieutenants, handpicked for their loyalty and intelligence, took over day-to-day operations, ensuring that shipments moved smoothly across borders. Payments were collected, and rival gangs were kept in check. Arben had built a system so resilient that even his physical absence could not dismantle it. The second escape had an unexpected side effect. It created a sense of invincibility around him. His name became a warning and a legend simultaneously. Street dealers, smugglers, and small-time criminals whispered about the man who had escaped twice from maximum security prisons. Law enforcement officers spoke cautiously, aware that every attempt to predict his next move seemed to fail. Even international agencies studying organized crime began tracking his empire with a mixture of fascination and fear. Arben had managed to turn his notoriety into a tool, using it to expand his reach while keeping enemies at bay. Rival gangs felt the pressure immediately. Many attempted to exploit his absence, believing that the leader's physical disappearance would weaken his control. However, they quickly discovered that Arben's influence was more than just personal. It was structural. Each division of his organization operated with independent efficiency, but every move was calculated to benefit the larger network. Ambushes on his shipments were met with swift retaliation, carefully orchestrated strikes that reminded everyone that Arben's power was not bound by his presence behind bars or in the streets. Arben himself remained in hiding, a ghost moving through shadows and safe houses, communicating only through trusted intermediaries. He monitored every operation with meticulous care, using coded messages and encrypted devices. His mind worked constantly, analyzing risk, predicting rivals' moves, and planning for a future he knew would eventually require another confrontation with law enforcement. He had learned that power was as much about perception as it was about action. By appearing untouchable, he ensured that enemies hesitated and allies remained loyal. The authorities, frustrated and humiliated, intensified their efforts. Surveillance operations increased, border controls were tightened, and cooperation with European agencies reached unprecedented levels. Yet, every lead seemed to vanish before it could be acted upon. Investigators began to realize that Arben was not simply hiding, he was observing, anticipating, and manipulating the very forces that sought to capture him. Every attempt to corner him was met with ingenious countermeasures, and each failure only reinforced his legend. During this time, Arben's network expanded beyond Albania. Contacts in neighboring countries facilitated the movement of shipments and money, and his empire began to resemble a well-oiled international organization. The man who had started in the back streets of Tirana had grown into a figure who could influence events far beyond his homeland. It became clear that capturing Arben would require more than strength or force. It would require intelligence, patience, and a level of strategy that few could match. By the end of this period, Arben Dervishi had transformed into something larger than life. He was no longer just a criminal or a fugitive. He was a symbol of organized crime, power, adaptability, and audacity. His absence did not weaken him. It amplified his presence in the underworld and beyond. While the world searched for him, Arben quietly solidified his empire, proving that sometimes the most dangerous criminals are those who can thrive even when they are nowhere to be found. After months of eluding capture, Arben Dervishi's luck finally ran out. Using a combination of undercover operations, informants, and intelligence shared by international law enforcement, authorities tracked him to a remote safe house on the outskirts of the Albanian countryside. The location was carefully chosen, isolated yet accessible, and equipped with multiple escape routes. But Arben, for all his cunning, had not anticipated the level of coordination that law enforcement was now capable of. The capture operation was executed with precision, leaving him with no chance to flee. Upon recapture, he was immediately transferred to a high-security prison, one of the most secure facilities in the region, designed to house the most dangerous criminals. Every detail of the prison was intended to prevent even the slightest chance of escape. Cells were reinforced with steel and concrete. Cameras monitored every angle, and movement within the facility was restricted to a strict schedule. Guards were trained to anticipate deception, and any deviation from routine was immediately investigated. For the first time in years, it seemed as if Arben Dervishi might truly be contained. Yet even in confinement, he remained calm and composed. Unlike other prisoners who might panic or resist, Arben observed everything with the careful scrutiny of a strategist. He noted patterns in guard shifts, studied the blind spots in surveillance coverage, and analyzed how routines could be exploited. Nothing escaped his attention: the timing of meal deliveries, the rotation of officers, even the placement of maintenance equipment. He understood that the prison's strength was in its routine, and routines, no matter how rigid, could be anticipated and manipulated. During his initial months in the facility, Arben appeared to comply with the rules. He attended the mandatory activities, remained in his cell during lockdowns, and avoided confrontation. But beneath this calm exterior, he was laying the groundwork for what would become yet another audacious escape. He communicated subtly with loyal contacts outside the prison, who continued to monitor opportunities, gather resources, and feed information about weaknesses in the system. Every piece of intelligence was noted, every potential advantage stored for future use. While authorities focused on maintaining strict control, Arben's influence continued quietly beyond the prison walls. His criminal network remained active, coordinated by trusted lieutenants who executed orders with the precision of a well-trained organization. Drug shipments, money laundering operations, and strategic negotiations continued uninterrupted, demonstrating that his empire was not dependent on his physical presence. In fact, some of his most loyal operatives claimed that the distance only made his control more effective, as it forced them to operate with greater independence while still adhering to his overarching strategy. As months passed, investigators began to realize that containment alone might not be sufficient to stop him. Arben was not only clever but patient, capable of waiting for the precise conditions to act. The realization sent waves of unease through the prison administration. They were dealing with a man who had already escaped twice and had never been fully cornered. Despite the heightened security, whispers began to circulate among guards and inmates alike. He was always thinking, always planning, and perhaps even here, in the supposed strongest prison, he could find a way to defy them once again. By the time of his fourth escape, Arben Dervishi had transformed from a dangerous criminal into an almost mythical figure, a strategist who could manipulate circumstances to his advantage, inspire loyalty beyond his walls, and outthink even the most sophisticated security measures. His reputation was no longer limited to the streets. It extended into the very institutions designed to stop him, leaving authorities to wonder whether anyone could truly contain a man of his intellect and ambition. Despite being confined in one of the most secure prisons in Albania, Arben Dervishi's mind never stopped working. Every day, he observed, calculated, and waited. He had already survived 2 daring escapes, and the authorities believed that maximum security would finally end his freedom. But Arben had learned long ago that no system was perfect, no matter how tight the control. Patience, observation, and precision were his weapons, and he intended to use them again. The opportunity came in a way no one could have predicted. One evening, the prison experienced a sudden, unexplained blackout. The entire facility plunged into darkness for several minutes, leaving guards disoriented and alarms delayed. Initially, staff assumed it was a technical fault, a minor inconvenience that would be quickly resolved. But for Arben, it was a window of opportunity, a fleeting moment where the weaknesses he had carefully mapped out over months could be exploited. Every camera had a blind spot during the outage, every door a vulnerability, and every distracted guard a potential gap in surveillance. Arben moved with calculated precision. His movements were almost ghost-like, slipping through corridors that should have been impossible to navigate unnoticed. Guards reported hearing faint noises, but assumed they were from maintenance or other prisoners. By the time the backup generators restored power, Arben had vanished. CCTV footage showed only shadows, fleeting glimpses of a figure moving swiftly in the dark. When the system came online, the cameras recorded empty hallways, locked doors undisturbed, and no trace of the mastermind who had orchestrated yet another escape. The revelation sent shockwaves through the prison system. How could someone escape from a facility designed for the most dangerous criminals in the country? Investigators reviewed every protocol, interviewed every officer, and examined the facility from top to bottom. Every detail pointed to a chilling conclusion. Arben had not only escaped, but had done so with the kind of precision and foresight that suggested inside help, extraordinary planning. Suspicion fell on staff members, and a wave of fear spread among those responsible for maintaining order. The unthinkable had happened, and no one knew how it had been accomplished. Outside the prison, Arben disappeared into the labyrinth of Albania's underworld. His network, already resilient, adjusted seamlessly to his absence. Operations continued with minimal disruption, a testament to the meticulous structure he had built over years. Meanwhile, authorities were left chasing shadows, trying to anticipate the moves of a man who seemed always to be several steps ahead. Every effort to track him led to dead ends, false leads, and growing frustration. By now, Arben Dervishi was no longer merely a criminal, he was a symbol of cunning and audacity. Stories of his 4th escape spread quickly, inspiring fear among rivals and disbelief among law enforcement. His ability to vanish from the supposedly most secure prison in the country cemented his legend, transforming him from a notorious figure into a near-mythical presence in the criminal world. Even those who had once dismissed him as a dangerous but ordinary gangster were forced to acknowledge a truth that was impossible to ignore. Arben Dervishi could not be contained, and perhaps no one could ever truly catch him. Following Arben Dervishi's 4th escape, the Albanian authorities were left in a state of unprecedented turmoil. Prison administrators, security officials, and investigators faced questions they had no immediate answers for. How could someone vanish so completely from a facility designed to be impenetrable? How had the same man outsmarted the system 4 times? The investigation into the escape revealed more than just procedural weaknesses. It exposed a network of corruption and complicity that ran far deeper than anyone had imagined. Evidence suggested that some prison staff had been compromised, either through bribes or intimidation. Small but critical lapses, doors left unlocked. Surveillance cameras malfunctioning at the exact wrong time, communications delayed, painted a picture of inside assistance. Investigators discovered that certain officers had unexplained financial deposits, suspicious communications with unknown contacts, and a willingness to bend rules at critical moments. It became clear that Arben's influence had penetrated not just the streets and his criminal empire, but also the very institutions meant to hold him accountable. The conspiracy extended beyond the prison walls. Intelligence reports revealed that members of his organization were feeding him information about police movements, security protocols, and investigative tactics. These contacts allowed him to anticipate actions against him and plan escapes with a level of sophistication that bordered on genius. Each ally played a specific role, from technical experts who manipulated systems to insiders who observed routines and communicated weaknesses. Arben's network had become a shadow government of crime, orchestrating operations from both inside and outside the prison with ruthless efficiency. The authorities, now forced to consider corruption at multiple levels, implemented an exhaustive review of security protocols. Investigators conducted interrogations, searched personal records, and even monitored the movements of staff with unprecedented scrutiny. Every interaction, every action, and every anomaly was examined to uncover links to Arben's operations. Yet, despite the intensity of the investigation, direct evidence remained elusive. He had been meticulous in covering his tracks, leaving only indirect clues that suggested the scope of his planning without providing concrete proof. The public, meanwhile, became fascinated and terrified by Arben's exploits. Newspapers and online forums chronicled his escapes, speculated on his whereabouts, and debated the extent of corruption within Albania's prison system. He became a figure that transcended the ordinary criminal, part myth, part cautionary tale. Citizens questioned how a single individual could repeatedly outwit an entire system, while criminals in the underworld began to see him as a symbol of unmatched cunning and power. Even as authorities intensified their search, Arben remained elusive. His ability to manipulate people, systems, and circumstances made him unpredictable. Analysts concluded that the combination of inside help, precise planning, and unwavering patience had made his escapes almost inevitable. Yet they also recognized that while the conspiracy had aided him, it was Arben's intellect, foresight, and relentless ambition that truly allowed him to exploit it. By the time the investigation into the fourth escape reached its peak, it was clear that the story of Arben Dervishi was no longer just about crime. It was a story of corruption, influence, and the extraordinary ability of one man to defy even the most fortified systems. His legend had grown beyond the streets he once controlled, into the very institutions that sought to stop him, leaving a trail of questions, fear, and awe that would persist long after his shadow had vanished. Arben Dervishi's current whereabouts remain a mystery, and the speculation surrounding him has become as legendary as his crimes. Some believe he fled Albania entirely, disappearing into Europe's sprawling underground networks where he could continue his operations undetected. Others think he might still be close to home, blending seamlessly into the shadows of Tirana or neighboring regions, orchestrating his empire with the same precision that allowed him to escape 4 times from prison. His absence has only fueled the myth, turning him into a symbol of criminal brilliance and unstoppable ambition. While law enforcement continues to hunt for him, Arben's influence has never been more evident. His organization remains intact, operating as a highly efficient network that adapts to changing circumstances. Shipments cross borders, money flows through secure channels, and rival gangs tread cautiously, aware that every move could trigger retaliation. Even without appearing in public, Arben commands loyalty and respect, a reminder that true power does not require visibility. Every decision he made during his years on the run had been meticulously calculated, ensuring that his empire could survive without his physical presence. Authorities have tried every strategy imaginable: raids, undercover operations, surveillance, and international cooperation, but Arben's skill at staying ahead has frustrated every attempt. Every lead seems to vanish, every trace of him evaporates before investigators can act. It is as though he exists in a parallel world, a ghost who manipulates reality from behind the scenes. Analysts studying his methods have described him as a master strategist, capable of predicting the actions of law enforcement and rivals with uncanny accuracy. His fourth escape, in particular, has become a case study in criminal ingenuity, inspiring both awe and fear. The public fascination with Arben Dervishi has grown alongside fear. In neighborhoods, cafes, and online forums, stories circulate of his daring escapes, his intelligence, and the loyalty of his network. Some admire his audacity, while others are horrified by the scale of his crimes. For many, Arben is no longer just a criminal, he is a legend, a cautionary figure whose story illustrates the limits of authority and the consequences of corruption. His ability to manipulate systems and people alike has left a lasting impression on the national consciousness. Despite the uncertainty of his location, one fact remains undeniable. Arben Dervishi has changed the landscape of organized crime in Albania. He proved that even the most secure prisons could be vulnerable, that power could extend beyond physical boundaries, and that intelligence, patience, and strategy could overcome almost any obstacle. His story is a reminder of the thin line between control and chaos, and of the extraordinary lengths a determined individual can go to defy the law. As the investigation continues and his empire adapts, the legend of Arben Dervishi grows. Some say he will eventually be caught, while others believe he may have already vanished permanently, leaving behind only whispers of his exploits. Regardless of what the future holds, his story will endure a tale of ambition, cunning, and audacity, a chilling testament to a man who escaped the impossible, not once, not twice, but 4 times, and left a world of mystery, fear, and fascination in his wake.